Thank you for tuning in to Ungentrified with Kent Johnson. Ungentrified takes an unfiltered view on pop culture, music, television and film, politics, current events, and topics central to the worldwide Black community. Ungentrified is a safe audio space for celebrating Black culture in its purest form. Thank you for joining another episode of Ungentrified. This is your host, of course, your boy Kent Johnson, and I have an old friend and a very dope guest with me today. But before we get into who that is, well, let me pause. So we're doing things a little bit differently today. We're not doing current events because this is another episode where I want to give as much time as I possibly can to the conversation. But we are going to do what I always do, which is ask everyone that comes on the show what's on their radar at the moment. So it could be something that's hot to you, something that you're holding to yourself because you don't want the rest of the world to figure out it's hot yet. It could be an album, a book, a YouTube hole you've fallen into, something you're binging on Netflix. So what's on your radar right now?
And apologies for my voice. It's really, really bad. I have a little bit of a cold. But right now, I think I'm obsessed with a movie that just came out 2 weeks ago on Netflix called To All the Boys I've Loved Before by a good friend of mine named Jenny Han. It's based on a book, and it's amazing. And so I've been watching that over and over again, obsessing. So that's what's hot for me right now.
Yeah. I think you and every woman I
Yes.
know, and not even teenage girls, every woman I know is obsessed with this movie right now.
I'm so glad to hear that. And the men folk need to be obsessed with it too, okay?
Yeah, I told myself I was going to watch it just to be aware of what has drawn everyone into it. But
The rom-com is back.
yeah,
Like, it's time. I need these men folk out here to remember what love was like for you in high school when you first learned how to fall in love, first learned about love. I want us to go back to that a little bit. And that movie captures a lot of that, which I love.
Yeah.
The first time you loved, without all of the boundaries, without all of the bruises and the fear. So.
And the responsibility, right?
Exactly. Like, I want us to be able to sort of flash back to that when we were teens. There's something beautiful about it. We weren't so worried about our pride.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I don't think we knew exactly what that entailed yet, which is, I mean, it makes for such an expressive time. But I'm glad that you brought up that movie because it really speaks to our conversation today. So I'm gonna pin that and go with what's on my radar at the moment, which is randomly for me roller coaster. So
What?
yes, so the people who know me and like my heart of hearts know that I am an extreme roller coaster fan. So around the end of August,
Sorry.
hey, don't laugh, don't judge. It's one of those things that has stayed with me ever since I was a kid and I got on my first roller coaster. But at the end of August is when a lot of the amusement parks all over the world announce like their roller coasters for the upcoming year. So
Who knew? But you.
Yeah, but me. But no, there's a big like roller coaster community online. Don't ask me how I know.
Oh my God.
So I've been watching like the announcement videos for like the different roller coasters.
It's a roller coaster fandom, essentially.
Yes, yeah.
Like a Comic-Con of roller coasters.
Somebody needs to do that. Make a coaster con. I think there is a coaster con. I haven't.
Oh my God.
I haven't ascended to that level of fandom yet.
You haven't done a deep dive.
Yeah. Haven't ridden that ride yet, but yeah, it's a thing that I love. So I've been going on YouTube and watching like the videos, and then they have like the computer mock-ups of the rides, and then I have like certain amusement parks.
Oh boy!
So, yeah, it's a very nerdy part of me. Like I said, at one point in high school, I thought that I was going to be an engineer so that I could be an engineer and someone who made roller coasters. But that,
That's super cool.
yeah. So maybe that's a late career for me. Who knows? Maybe 20 years from now, that'll be
Why
my
not?
thing. Right. Hey, why not?
Why
Yeah,
not?
I can do it.
You can do it. You can do all the things.
Yes. So that has been the rabbit hole that I have fallen into on YouTube as of the last week or so. Is checking out all of the new roller coasters coming next year. So
That's hilarious. And you're not afraid. You're not. I'm afraid. I'm a chicken.
you're
I'm
so
not
you're
having
terrified
it.
of roller coasters?
Yeah, I lost my shoes on one when I was in the 7th grade because it was back when you wore those Reeboks and you
Uh-huh.
didn't tie them up. You like let the laces I don't know. I don't even know what I was doing. And I got on a roller coaster with my friends. I thought I was so cute and I lost my shoes. They flew off my feet.
So
I had to go home
yeah, I'm
without
about to
shoes.
say, how did the rest of the day go for you?
It was over. I had to call my father to come pick me up, and he was like, "You idiot! Like thought you were so cute. Now I told you to tie your shoes, and now look at you, done
Right.
lost your shoe and shut the ride down because the shoes fell into the ride and
Oh
messed up the mechanics. So I ruined the fun for everybody.
Oh yeah. I would have been talking about you had I been there in the
Yeah,
line. You would not have heard the end of that.
exactly. So I was the girl who shut the roller coaster down and ruined the class trip at the end of the year.
Oh no. Well, at least it was the end of the year, so you had the
Right.
summer to kind of rebuild whatever cred you need for
But I
the
thought I
following
was
year.
I was trying to be cute. Like I was working on myself. So I felt like I had ascended to this place and then I lost my throne with that. Somehow me and roller coasters do not get along and I will hold your bags as you go and enjoy yourself, but it's not for me. Mm-mm.
One of the things I haven't done yet is gone to an amusement park when I've traveled outside of the country. Either I've been in a place where it's just not that time of year for them, or the amusement park sucked and I just didn't go. So that's one trip that I want to plan for myself. It's like when I go amusement park hopping out of the country. So if anyone's listening and you too are a roller coaster fanatic like I am, hit me up. Let's make something happen because we
That's
do
hilarious.
exist.
Oh my God, roller coaster heads.
Yes. We are a thing. You guys are probably wondering who I've been talking to for the last couple of minutes, and I'm going to let her introduce herself. So go ahead and tell the people who you are.
Well, my voice doesn't normally sound like this, so just know I sound way better. But my name is Dhonielle Clayton, and I'm an author and writer. I do a lot of things that my brain is blanking out on, but my primary job is that I write books for young readers, for teens, and I have 3 books out. My first series is called the Tiny Pretty Things series. It's like Pretty Little Liars set in a ballet boarding school where 3 girls are willing to do whatever it takes to be the best. And then my latest series is called The Bells. It's a high fantasy series set in a different world where everyone is born looking sort of gross and degenerative, but there are these women that can change you down to your bones for the right price. And so my film agent pitches it as sort of like a female Game of Thrones. So really dark and messed up. So yeah, I'm a writer. I'm an author. And I also run a company called Cake Literary where I come up with ideas, an idea factory, and I hire writers to write them, me and my business partner, and then our agent sells those books to publishers because I'm trying to diversify the children's book publishing industry, one book at a time.
Yeah.
So, yes. I also work for a nonprofit called We Need Diverse Books, and I'm COO of that corporation, trying to also, again, help diversify children's book publishing. So yeah, those are a few of the things that I do.
That was a great list. Every time I have a guest come on, I tell them beforehand, like, tell everybody everything that you do. I want you to give yourself your flowers. Yeah, and it's hard, but it's the truth. So tell it.
Right. I know, but it is hard. We are taught, especially women, especially Black women, not to brag or boast, to always sort of be nice and almost diminish yourself. So it feels like bragging when you just lay out the things that you do.
Right.
And so I have to fight against that sort of programming.
Look, we got to acknowledge our amazing and normalize it so that other people know that they can do it too.
Right. Makes sense.
But Dhonielle laid out reasons why she's here. She does amazing work in the literary field, and she tasked herself with making sure that diversity is key and authentic all across the board. So in past episodes, I've worked to kind of pull the veil back on people who work in film, people who work in television or their respective fields, and give us their experiences as a person of color or as, in some cases, as a Black woman, and really give us insight into what they deal with and what they're trying to do. And these are all people who are working to affect change. So Dhonielle has been really killing it this year as far as uh, the books coming out. You've had conversations, but I don't know, regular people like Katie Couric,
Uh-huh.
just the regular folk, and really helping people to see that there is work to be done in this area of entertainment. So you told us that what's been on your radar lately was To All the Boys I've Loved Before, which was originally a book, a YA book or a young adult book. And we've seen that happening a lot lately, where a lot of young adult books are being turned into massive money makers, whether it be in television or in film, and just a general interest in the work that is coming out of that particular genre of books versus really, I feel like any other books. I think some of
Agreed.
the some of the more creative things are happening in young adult literature. Why do you think that is?
I think that kids, and I'm biased, I was a teacher and a librarian for 10 years. Kids have the biggest imaginations. As we get older, our worldviews start to shrink and we lose a little bit of the magic. Kids have so much possibility for magic. They will follow you down any little rabbit hole you take them. They just want a good story. They want something to talk about. When I was a librarian, my students would always be like, I want drama. Just give me something with drama, or I want to cry. And they just want to fall into something bigger than themselves. And so I feel like books for kids have an opportunity to create lifelong readers, lifelong storytellers, lifelong artists. And so we are charged with such a huge task to create fun things and to be responsible about what we create for these people that have such a huge imagination. I feel like it's a blessing to be able to write for this age group, and it's a lot of fun. I get to make up stuff and have them follow me down a dark road and see what's at the end of it.
Do you feel like, or I mean, not even do you feel like, your demographics for readership, are you having a lot of adults at like your signings and any kind of events that you have? Are you seeing more adult readers for your books?
I see a lot of adult readers. Yeah. I'm lucky that I go to a lot of festivals that are kid focused. So I get tons of teens and I get to talk to teens and I get to sign books for them. I do have a lot of adult readers, which are great. Adult readers are awesome, especially teachers and librarians who are reading so that they can serve their students and make sure that they know what's out there so that they can create sort of a gateway to literacy for our students by reading the books. I feel like you cannot be an educator without reading the books and consuming the media that your kids are consuming so that you can have something to talk to them about. So I see both adults and teen readers, and I love them equally for different things and different reasons.
Yeah, when I too had a moment in time as a teacher, and I was a 6th grade language arts teacher, and the books we read were books that I read as a 6th grader. So I had a close emotional tie with them, but then I was excited for them to read it and also have those conversations with them and have them discover it. So yeah, you absolutely have to read, even as if you're a parent, read the books that your kids are reading. To open up that conversation and just to know what your kids are consuming.
Also, readers are created in the laps of other readers. So I really firmly believe, and I know the science shows that there is a direct correlation between the books in your household and being read to and your literacy rate. When you have kids showing up in kindergarten, there are kids that could already read. Mostly, some of it is because their parents are reading to them and reading with them. So I think that we just have to get more involved with this next generation.
Yeah, I'm like that with my godson. So I'm always trying to get him books or send him books. Or if I sent him something that was fun, I would also send him a book to go along with it, just to make sure that like it had that correlation that books were fun.
Yeah, I have a 12-year-old niece, and she only gets books from me. That's it. She knows. She's like, "Oh, it's gonna be a book." I'm like, "Yep." She's like, "But what book is it?" So she knows me. It's a book.
So let's go a little bit deeper. Tell us about what it feels like or your experience. And this is, as I'm saying, a super broad question, but we'll dig deeper. What's it like to be a Black author in this particular genre?
Well, there are very few of us. So what I do love is that it feels like I'm in my own little tribe. So within young adult literature, there are only a few Black women and Black people, just because trying to get past these gatekeepers and diversify the industry has been, difficult. I feel it's a blessing. I love being a Black writer. People are like, well, don't you just want to be a writer? I'm like, no, I come from a specific tradition and I stand on the shoulders of giants, of Black women and men who came before me. And I'm so happy to be in that tradition. So it is both wonderful and it can also be stressful and almost strange in the fact that I feel like the industry and the population that we write for want a certain type of story from me, from my community. They like to hold up the stories of Black pain. Those are the ones that do super well. We need those stories. Those are important. But for every one of those Black pain stories for me, I want 5 stories about Black boy joy or Black girl magic, just so that there is a variety of what it means and feels like to occupy this skin and this experience. And so that, I think it's both a blessing to be a Black female writer, but also it comes with huge responsibilities and a lot of boxes that I'm sort of pushed into.
One of the things that's kind of an underlying current between all of the work I do and the episodes for Ungentrified is kind of not necessarily expanding the idea, but exposing the idea of regular Blackness, because it means so
Yes.
many different things. And
Yes.
we should be able to shine light on all of those quote unquote regular Blacknesses, and
Yeah. Make
and
space for them.
yeah. So I'm so glad that you went in that direction, because I think, as you mentioned, boxes, we, in all of the work that we do, we get labeled very quickly and expected to do certain things or create certain products because of who we are. Where the products that we create are inherently Black because we've created them. So it's that lesson that we're constantly trying to teach to everybody, and it's hard because, like you said, somebody wants you to write torture porn all the time
Yep.
about your people, and that's not the only thing that defines us. And
But it's profitable.
yeah,
And that's the sad thing, is that if I do write those books, I can make major profit for them because that's what the industry wants. That's what the mainstream thinks. But I have never been a person that did what I was told to do. My parents would be like, ain't that the truth? I wanted to do something different. I wanted to give Black children other mirrors of other types of experiences as well. We need to know about the pain, but we also need to know about the joy and know about magic and what that could look like.
right, right.
It's interesting. It's an interesting conundrum.
Sometimes we hear, well, not even sometimes, very often we hear this idea of there can only be one in a lot of fields. We see that,
Haha. The
and
Highlander.
yeah, yeah, only one at a time. I mean, right now, if we're looking at like pop culture for women in hip hop, there's this constant pitting of Cardi B against Nicki Minaj. Like, there can only be one Black woman at a time being successful in this area. Or in Hollywood, we hear that sentiment kind of thrown out often. Is that something that you see in the literary field?
Absolutely. It all works together. What's great about the children's book world right now is if you look at the New York Times bestseller list, the top 3 books right now currently are by 3 Black people. The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. She's one of my good friends. Her movie comes out in October. It's
Yes.
going to be wonderful. And then Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. She's also a good friend. And it's a fantasy world that's based off of Nigeria, secondary world fantasy. It's great. And then the third book is Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds, which he's one of my close friends. And it's about a boy who loses his brother, and this boy has to make a decision on whether or not he's going to take revenge. He gets in an elevator, and he has to, the long way down, he's got to figure out, is he going to do it? Is he going to get revenge? Those 3 books occupy the top sellers in the United States right now. And that makes me feel really great.
Yeah.
It's awesome. So it shows me that things are changing. And yes, there are only a few of us, and it doesn't match the population. I feel like our books should match the children that are reading them. And so we are doing a disservice not giving children lots of different types of mirrors. There's so many different types of children in this country, but it is getting better. I'm seeing slow progress. So there's that. But the Highlander effect is always going to be there for a while.
I'm glad you're giving it a name. Now, so
that's what I call it. Yeah, we have to flood it. We literally have to flood the market with these stories, with this media.
And it seems like the gatekeepers, as you call them, don't want that to occur. There was, and I know you're familiar with this, there was a tweet thread that went on earlier this year from a romance novelist, Courtney Milan. And
yes,
she kind of opened the door as to the drama and the just ill approach to writers of color in that space of literature. So she went on to discuss Harlequin books, and I guess it's an award and I learned a lot of history about this for the Romance Writers of America. It's this award that comes out every year, the Rita, and I dug for a long time trying to figure out what the acronym was for Rita, and found out it was actually a person. Rita was the first person who won that award. But this is prime time in romance writing. You want to be nominated for a Rita. You want to have a Rita on your shelf in your office. So this year there was a high amount of women of color, and the way they treated those women who were nominated was markedly different from how the white women who were up for the same award were treated. She dug into that and also dug into kind of like the subsections of Harlequin, and one of them was Kamani, which was where all of the writers of color were put. Regardless of whether or not you wrote books that had characters of color, if you were a writer of color, you were put in there. So you could be writing a book about old time Paris and have nothing but white characters in it. But if you were a black author, your book was a Kamani book. Which I thought was
absurd.
Yeah, it's bananas. This represented like 4.8% of all of the writers on the staff at Harlequin, which is abysmal. But they were trying to get rid of the Kamani group, but at the expense of not to lose that audience. They wanted those books to still be written, but they wanted those books written by white authors, even to the point where she talks about how an editor who worked for Harlequin approached one of the award-winning authors from that Kamani group and asked her to her face, hey, could you create a guide for the new authors that we're bringing on to write these books? We don't want you to write it. We don't need your talent, but we want you to develop a guide for the white authors so that they could write diversely, which blew my mind. I was like, wait a minute. None of that is okay. When I first read it, I was like, man, that sucks for the romance field, and that's very telling of how things work in a lot of industries. But is that something that you see in your space in the literary world?
Absolutely. What you're seeing is a microcosm of what's going on in the entire literary field, whether it's adult, whether it's kids, picture books, middle grade, young adults, where the industry is trying to fix a problem that was highlighted. But the way that they're doing that, and the way that they started doing that, is that a lot of well-meaning white folks answered the call for we need diverse books. Oh my gosh, I feel so sad. There aren't these books. I can write these books. And then publishers are like, let's get people in to read these books that are written by white people about marginalized communities and make sure that they're doing their, that they're okay, instead of hiring marginalized writers to write their own stories. So there's a lot of that going on. And the romance industry is feeling it super, super implicitly, because romance has always been so segregated,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they put people into these little pockets, these little ghettos, where it's like, oh, your romance is a trap romance book, or for in the African American section. And Lord forbid anyone else who's not from that community would read your work. So it's a lot of these assumptions that certain people aren't marketable, certain people aren't commercial. And so they're sent off into a little place where their book dies, into a niche market. So it really, really sucks. And it takes a lot of different course corrections, lots of different types of things to fix the problem. First of all, we've got to get more people writing their own stories and then understanding the business. And then we have to get salespeople and marketing people and agents and editors to figure out how to sell this stuff and look at and get creative, change their methods. They've been doing the same thing for so many years and they don't like to change. So it was super sad to see what was happening. Kamani True is a great imprint. When I was a librarian, they have a young adult line of books as well that show Black and Latinx girls in love, in their relationships in high school. And I used to buy tons of those books for my girls and for my boys to read. They loved it. So it is important that people want to see themselves represented, just like Crazy Rich Asians is doing amazingly in the box office. People are hungry to see themselves, and other people are hungry to see other types of people and their worlds. So I think there's a lot of things going on. It's a big storm happening in all of different areas of the literary industry and world.
I always get concerned because it's like, well, what happens after the storm? So we look at just the example you gave, the top best-selling books, the top 3 books right now are all from Black writers.
Yes.
That's an amazing thing. These books are doing extremely well. We know that there are conversations being had at their respective publishing houses about the success. But what does that conversation end up in? If we look, 6 to 8 months from now, have we seen a change in the pitches that get approved, the conversations that are being had about certain books, the opportunities being had, or is it where when this happens again, in a year or so, is it that shock again? Because we keep having these moments of, oh my God, it really happened, instead of acknowledging that no, it would happen much more if opportunities were given to these marginalized communities. We shouldn't be shocked by
That
Crazy
Black
Rich
Panther
Asians.
does. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Or Black Panther.
Yeah, we shouldn't be surprised by that anymore, because every time the opportunity is there, it happens,
But racism and white supremacy is a hell of a drug.
Hey.
And it keeps people in a fog,
Right.
and they can't seem to get out of it. And this is such a subjective business. That's it's about taste. But what happens when your taste is racist? And so that's what we have to sort of confront. And that's the hard part, because publishing is made of people, and mostly white women, at least the children's book publishing industry.
And one of the things you've said about yourself is that you write about things that bother you. So
yes.
How has that worked in your career as a writer? How many times has what's bothered you been able to turn into something that fully formed? Or did you get pushback because it wasn't something that everyone else saw as important?
Well, I think I literally only write about things that bother me. So everything that I do, my first series takes place in a ballet boarding school, and it's about perfection. That bothered me when I was 16. I wanted to be perfect. I didn't know if you could be perfect. I wanted to do all the things in order to have that. The Bells is literally about how I felt and feel about women's bodies, and how they are commodified, and how they are treated as if they are food or almost products. And I was upset with the beauty industry. So everything that I write, even short stories that I write, I center around something that irritates me, because it keeps me tethered to the page. Writing is a very, very hard process. It's stressful. If you're doing what you need to do, you're leaving behind a pound of flesh. So I need to be able to always expose something that I'm frustrated with, even if it's messy. So I've gotten a great response to that, because most of the things that bother me also bother other people, because it's the things that I'm bothered about in terms of life and relationships and the way that things are set up, or the way that I feel about stuff. So teenagers have a lot of things that bother them. So it's been great to see my book received well by teens, because they're angry, they're mad. I was a mad teenager as well, so I haven't really gotten as much pushback. I have to set creative goals for myself and remind myself that I don't need to cater to the white gaze in order to tell my stories. And that's the part. It's really a battle against myself. And as I'm creating, that I'm getting the most sort of fighting the most trouble. I'm trying to deprogram and decolonize my own imagination. So far, as I've entered the industry, I haven't had as much pushback about what I want to write, but I'm sort of battling myself at this point.
Well, look, let's dig deeper into some other things that bother you and the white gaze, since you brought it up. I'm going to quote you right now.
Uh-oh.
So earlier this year, I feel like we're talking about tweets a lot in this episode, but earlier this year, you tweeted, "I wish there were more Black reviewers, y'all. I'm really tired of hot takes on my book from white ladies. I'm tired of Black pain being the standard bearer of Blackness, and those writers who don't use it overtly as an instrument for character building or world building get marked down." What sparked that thumb storm on
Oh
your
yeah,
phone that day?
I was mad. So I was reviewed for the first time in the New York Times, which is a huge deal for any writer.
Mhm.
And so it was a roundup of books, 5 books by women of color, but it was written by a white woman. And she compared my book, The Bells, to my friend Tomi Adeyemi's book, Children of Blood and Bone, and she knocked me and used this term, said that my friend Tomi's book was Black Girl Magic indeed, and my book was not. So I was pissed off and irritated because, one, why am I, a Black woman, being reviewed in the New York Times by a white woman who might not pick up my codes? So I leave cultural codes behind. When we look at my book, The Bells, on the outside, it's a book about a world where everyone is born looking gross, and that there are these women that can change you down to your bones for the right price. It's a book about beauty. It's a book where there is no Africa or America or South America or Asia. It's a secondary world that doesn't exist. But if this woman was paying attention to the codes that I left behind, this is a book that the world is based off of both New Orleans, France, and Japan. And the way that I've set up the power structure is that there are these women, these girls that literally control beauty. But all of the laws and all of the things that govern their existence mirror American chattel slavery. And so if she was paying attention, she would realize that I wrote a book about slavery. It's about blood, it's about power, freedom, all of these things, breeding, and she didn't pick up my codes. And because in the wonderful book, Children of Blood and Bone, those codes are very overt, she's very much talking about a parallel to sort of Black Lives Matter and an oppressive sort of government and things like that. They are codes that this white lady is familiar with, that are in the news, that she could easily pick up. She couldn't hear the codes in my book. So I was super frustrated that she would knock me and dock me down because I was not giving her the whistles that she's used to hearing to be able to trigger, oh, this is about plant pain. This is about Blackness. This is about the struggle. My book is also about the struggle, but I packaged it a little differently. So I was really, really frustrated with that. And the fact that I don't get enough critique from other Black women. And it's not that I don't value white women's critiques about my work in my book, but that's all I get. So I'm looking for other voices. especially voices that can pick up the breadcrumbs that I've left behind. One of my good friends who's a writer, her name is Justina Ireland. She wrote a book called Dread Nation, which is fabulous. She was reading the book and she messaged me and she was like, "Oh shit, you wrote a book about slavery." That's literally what she wrote to me. And I was like, "Thank you." And it took her, another Black woman, reading my work. She's heard my codes. She heard literally the drum beats that I left behind. And it finally legitimized, like, okay, I did do that. I left those things behind on purpose. And when this white lady reviewed me for the New York Times, I was really frustrated because I was like, great, you don't get it. You don't get it. And that's okay. You don't have to get it. But I wish that I had had a Black woman review me and review me more often who gets it, who has those codes in their bones, who can pick up on those things. It's just like when my friend Tomi, who wrote Children of Blood and Bone, talks about Nigerian readers reading her book. I can't pick up all the codes in her book because it's based off of a Nigerian secondary world. I'm not Nigerian, so I don't hear all of those things. I get a certain layer of codes, but not all of them. So it's sort of similar. And I needed to have that reinforced to me that I did leave those things behind and that there are readers that will read my book on a different level. And I was frustrated. I took to Twitter.
Yes, you did. I think what happens too is in a lot of cases, so the way you approached Tomi's book was that you knew that there were things in there that may not, register on you, but you didn't take that as something that was a negative.
Nope.
You knew that that was a space that was designed for someone, specific to that knowledge to pick up that and appreciate it. And you didn't knock it for not including you. Whereas,
exactly.
Yeah, I think, in spaces like that, especially for white critics, whether it be movies, television, books, so be it. The approach I see often is, well, this didn't include me, so it automatically has to be a bad thing. It automatically has to be lackluster because I am not included in this conversation. How dare you remove me from consideration when you wrote this? And they write from that perspective instead of saying, oh, you know what, there were really unique insights that I may not have been able to uncover, but they were there for people who could. So I always get frustrated when I read or hear about examples of that because it comes up so often. And I think we're designed as Black people to appreciate the consideration of others because it's just of our nature to do. And in the space that we've had to exist in America, it's a part of our survival as well, is to be,
yes,
comfortable with things that weren't necessarily made for us.
But white folks are not programmed.
Yeah.
The world has been designed to make them feel comfortable. They don't have to yield. So if she doesn't get it, that's a knock on me. I'm supposed to make sure that she gets it because I'm supposed to cater to her,
right,
as a reviewer.
I can only imagine how frustrated you were with that, because it frustrates me just being someone who hears that happening. But when your actual, work, your sweat and tears and blood went into something, and someone kind of dismisses it as, oh well, I don't. It's not for me, so I can't even attempt to understand it. It just has to be lower than that. It boggles me, and I always wonder, like, why is it so hard for media outlets, publications to put subject matter experts, i.e. Black folks or people of color, in these spaces to really give certain works the review that they need? Why?
Because they think they know everything. They think that they can empathize and they can theorize what it means to be a Black American because they've lived in a country with them and lived and seen them and been alongside them. It's an arrogance and a belief that they can do that. So it's funny because when I do a lot of readings and, we'll get into this, me being a sensitivity reader, there's an assumption that they just think they know. And you don't know what you don't know. So they're like, oh, we don't need that. There's this assumption that they don't need it because they feel like they already know. So they don't hire. They don't hire us.
I'm glad you gave me the perfect segue into the other side. You talked about it earlier when you laid out all of the wonderful things that you do, but a sensitivity reader. This is something that uh, is a new job description or a new job for me, but and I'm sure a lot of people who may be listening to this are probably like, what in the world is that? But this is a thing that exists in the literary world, a sensitivity reader. Can you explain to those who are listening what a sensitivity reader is?
Sure, that term is newer because usually they used to use the term like cultural expert.
Mhm.
So essentially, in the children's book publishing world, if you are writing something it's like if I wrote a book about a lawyer, I'm not a lawyer. I would need a lawyer to read and vet the details. Did I get the court proceedings correct? Did I use the right terminology, etc.? So I'm a sensitivity reader. I hate the word sensitive because it's not about being sensitive. It's about being sharp and reading for detail and reading for problematic elements. And so I read books for publishers and for writers and authors that feature characters that have my same background. And I look for issues of representation and authenticity. So it should be an authenticity read or what's a targeted beta read, where I'm reading for a targeted thing, like an editor reads for plot and character and world. I'm reading for a specific experience. And so I'm paid to do that, to bring my experience and read for those things. I also use sensitivity readers in my own work. I wrote a book about ballet. I was a ballerina for 10 years, but I did not do ballet at a professional level. I needed professional ballerinas to read and vet my work. So I got a ballet sensitivity read, several of them. So everyone has their panties in a bunch about it, but it's not that big a deal. It's a craft issue. So when people are mad and they stay mad about this topic, I don't get it. I really don't understand.
And you said this is something that has become a job in the field in the last couple of years, and I guess along with the rise of everyone being hyper aware about everything and representation, and just to bring back what we talked about earlier, where instead of hiring the black writers to write these stories, they're the saviors that came and were like, "Oh, I can do it," and
Mm-hmm.
and now they're writing these stories without any kind of imprint on themselves to truly be an authentic representation.
Exactly. Or
Yeah,
be held accountable.
right.
You don't get to write about me and then I have to stay quiet about it.
And I'm glad that you brought up that even it's not just for white folks. Like you, in doing the due diligence to craft a fantastic story, knew that you needed to bring on authenticity readers or sensitivity readers
Absolutely.
to tell the right story. And again, it's just that conversation of, you and your space knew that it would be best that you didn't know it all. And that
Yes.
it would be best to bring in experts to do so. You didn't feel like you could cover all that. Because even not only in the area, I know your book focuses on ballet, but there were characters of diverse backgrounds in your book as
Yes.
well. So,
Mm-hmm.
I think you said you had, was it 12 readers you brought in for your book?
Yes. I had 12 readers for my first series. Mm-hmm.
So
Because I'm not playing around. I want it to be good. And as a black content creator, and my business partner and writing partner is Indian American, so she's Punjabi, she knows that we are going to be held to a level that's higher than everybody else. We have to be twice as good to get half as far. So we knew we needed to do the work to make sure that we nailed it, that we made sure that it was good. It was a good story, the packaging was good, that it was fun, that teens liked it, and that the representation was authentic.
when I read that you had 12 writers come on, the first thing that popped into my mind was how many books aren't having an authenticity read that are just hidden, rolling off the presses and into bookstores every day, having
Every day, thousands of books.
that put a fear in my heart. I was like, man, all of these books that are just rolling out that have no one there to kind of gut check, the authors on, hey, no, that's not how black people speak. No, that's not what occurs in a Punjabi household. Like these are,
Yes.
the conversations that people should want to have, but people just feel like they know it all.
They
So
feel like they know it all. It's an arrogance.
yeah,
And I don't have that arrogance because I know that I don't know it all and I don't want to know it all. I want to discover discover it. And writing is discovery. But I also don't want to do damage. I know what harmful representation looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Black Americans know that. If you look at any sort of Jim Crow memorabilia and imagery, you can see that those images that were printed in children's books, that were literally made into figurines, that were created shows, TV shows off of, follow us. They literally create a caricature of what it means to be Black American. And that stuff has consequences. It shapes worldviews. It travels with you. You are a traveler. I am a traveler. When we leave the United States and we go to places, I encounter views about Black Americans that are based off of a lot of that bullshit. So I know that children's books especially are places to undo that. What do we say about Black people in books? What do we show? Why is the evil person? If we look at something like Lord of the Rings, right? One of the biggest books that came out of Britain, and a titular sort of tentpole of fantasy and genre. Everyone's trying to redo him. If you look at the bad guy, the orcs, they have matted, dreadlocked hair, dark skin. They are huge, and a lot of them are super muscular, right? If we look at the codes, then we look at who is good. The elves and the men are very pale, have long, willowy hair that catches the light. Like, it's these things that create imagery over time. People can say we can ignore it, but it's real. And it has consequences.
And on that note, we're going to take a brief break, but we'll be right back to wrap up this episode of Ungentrified after a word from one of our sponsors. This episode of Ungentrified is brought to you by Black and Abroad. Black and Abroad is an online travel community dedicated to inspiring and celebrating the experiences of Black travelers and expats. Interested in traveling with a hand-picked group of individuals just like you? Check out Black and Abroad's curated travel experiences in destinations worldwide. Upcoming trips include Johannesburg in December for Afropunk. You can find out more about Black and Abroad and its upcoming journeys by visiting weareblackandabroad.com. Speaking of consequences, what kinds of notes are you leaving for people when you're doing an authenticity read on their piece of work? What kind of scratches are you leaving? What kind of red lines are you giving people?
So usually, what I do is I read it and I give sort of my line feedback on things that pop out to me. Because Jacqueline Woodson, who's wonderful, said that when you write outside of yourself, and if you write about Black Americans, she said this in a Hornbook issue, which is a magazine that is very popular in the children's book industry and the librarian industry, so that she wants to feel like you are in her grandmother's kitchen. That if you're going to write about us, then you need to know what it's like to be in my grandmother's kitchen. The smells, the textures, you need to have held the babies, all of that. So I go in sort of reading as if, like, do I feel like this character, this world, this setup, whatever it is, speaks to my experience? And so most of the time, it's silly stuff. Black girls always have braids because the person who's writing the book has no idea what it means to have Black American hair and the history and the texture, all of that stuff. They always have some sort of braids, or they're sassy. For one read I gave, was they were talking about a Black family and they were having a casserole. And I was like, absolutely not. I was like, have you been to a Black person's house and had dinner? Because I didn't have a casserole until I went to a white person's house. That just wasn't, my grandparents are from Mississippi and North Carolina. And I know that we have regional differences in cuisine, but I know casseroles are not our go-to as a community. Right? I don't hear nobody talking about somebody's grandma's casserole. Mm-mm. So, like, stuff like that, where it's just like, oh, this is egregious. Like, we don't eat that. Or just the texture of language, the way my mother talks to me, the way my grandmother talks to me. The stuff that if you have not been in the kitchen, you don't know. Stuff like, did you take out, don't touch the good china, right? Like little little things. And I don't expect someone who's not of my community to get those things. But I know that if you're writing a character who is Black American, there are certain things that you cannot ignore. I read a picture book for a publisher, and it was just a book about love. And the little Black girl was identifying things that she loved. Love is this, love is that. And there was one scene in the picture book where the little girl was in the bathtub and she was washing her own hair. And the little girl was 5. I said, absolutely not. Little 5-year-old Black girls with thick curly hair do not wash their hair in the tub by themselves. Right? It is a ritual. It is a process. My grandmother washed my hair every Sunday and she laid me across that kitchen counter, and that's how it got done. Not everyone had that, but I know that is, we don't do that. And it showed a scene of a little Black girl in bed, and her hair was a mess. And I said, no, she's not going to go to bed without her hair set and with a scarf on or a satin pillow. I said, these are like little texture things. It's because you have a white illustrator and a white writer who aren't paying attention to nuance. And if you want me to believe that this is a little Black girl who lives with a Black mama and a Black daddy, there are some things that are just normal for me that are not captured. So it's little stuff like that it's just they just don't know.
One of the things that I push out often, or I say whenever under Black and Abroad, I get in a room, because a lot of times we're invited to speak about diversity in travel or just diversity in the workplace and inclusion and how those two words go together or don't. I'm of the mindset that they don't a lot of times, at least not in application. But one of the things I always tell people is that diversity is not putting a Black or a brown face on a white experience or a white narrative. And a lot of times that's what happens too. It's just like, oh, as you mentioned, like a white illustrator, he's just like, oh, okay, I'll just make the space brown and not take into consideration context and texture, as you mentioned. Even Disney was catching flack for it recently, how they portrayed Princess Tiana in the new, I think it's the Wreck-It Ralph movie, where they had her hair texture in a certain way, and like the Twitter authenticity readers or authenticity viewers were like, no, that's not how.
Oh, Black Twitter came for
Yes.
Twitter came for them.
Yes, because they were like, A, she's considerably lighter than she was originally portrayed in The Princess and the Frog. Then her hair texture wouldn't be like that if it matched that of the movie. She wouldn't just have it like they really went in and did the work that someone should have done. Yeah, it was a whole thing on there. But they did the work. They did the authenticity read, and you can take read however you want to interpret that, on Disney, on how they portrayed Princess Tiana in this new movie. So yeah, it's I can only imagine that work and reading some of these things. You're like, wait a minute, no, that would never happen in a Black household. Or even when white authors take on the task of writing like dialect and accents in a way that they feel like a Black person would speak. Uh, is that a lot of your work as well?
Yes. Also, I think that there's a way that you can capture the texture of someone's speech patterns without making a caricature of them. So my hackles go up when I read Black vernacular written by white folks. I'm just not having it. I'm really not. So I just think that you can capture, again, the cadence and the rhythm of the way someone speaks versus creating a caricature. My writing partner, Sona, and I had to make a decision in Tiny Pretty Things because one of the main characters is Korean American and her mom is first generation, and so English is her second language. And we did not want to create choppy, broken English on the page, but what we did was we created a rhythm to her speech pattern, to where certain words might be cut off or she might use the wrong word for something so that the reader can imagine it themselves. They know what that speech pattern is like for someone who English is their second language and the words that they would trip up over. And Sona understood that as a person, who has members of their family that also speak like that. So we just modeled it after that instead of creating harm and creating a caricature. There's no need for that. I don't see any people say, oh, it's authentic. Is it really? Is it really? Or
Right.
can we create the rhythm of the way someone speaks?
And then it's authentic to whom? So
Exactly.
is it authentic to your idea of what, someone would sound like in this situation, or your, whatever history of stereotypes or racism that you explicitly or implicitly abide by? Is that what your authenticity streams from for people? It's like you said, it's deep and it goes way back, and sometimes people don't even realize how deep it is for the output that they create around that. So have you, in your work as a sensitivity reader, gotten any pushback on the notes that you've given someone?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I get arguments like, oh, but this, but that, but my friend, but this, and I get a lot of that, or but it's supposed, lots of explanation. Well, this character came out of my head fully formed. That's what I hear all the time. She just walked out of my head that way. I'm like, okay, but the way she walked out of your head is inauthentic. And if you want to capture a level of authenticity, then you need to make some tweaks. So yeah, I get that. I get pushback in that way because everyone is defensive about their art because it's their art. It's personal. Art is very personal and very close to you. So it's really their hackles go up and the defensiveness comes out. But there are some writers that really take the feedback in stride because they want their craft to be good.
Yeah.
And they want to reach readers and not leave anything harmful behind. So for the most part, I get really great feedback and my notes are embraced. It's once in a while I get the pushback.
Have you done any authenticity reads for other Black writers? Have you crossed that bridge yet? Has it happened?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've read for Black writers.
So how does that experience go?
It's the same.
Yeah.
And it's more of they're asking me to read, to check, to make sure that they got the layers. So it's just a different focus. And I'll be like, oh, you could punch up this here or punch up that here. So yeah, I've read for other Black writers. And usually it'll be intracultural, right? So it'll be my Nigerian friend will be like, can you read this for me with a lens thinking of Black Americans and how they'll read this? Or my Haitian friend will be like, can you read? What did you pick up in terms of the Black stuff? Because within our diaspora, we are very varied. And
Mm-hmm.
just because we have Black skin doesn't mean that we come from the same cloth. The quilt is the same, but the area is different.
Right.
So I have definitely read for other Black people, and it feels great. It feels wonderful that we can push each other in that way.
And I would think that it would almost be scary because, as you mentioned, there's very few of us in this space to begin with. So you already feel the burden of it has to be perfect. Like everything I do has to be top notch. And you don't want to be the person that gets the finger pointed at them if you didn't do the work to represent whatever variants of Blackness you were talking about.
Exactly.
So yeah, you want somebody to kind of be like, hey, did I do this right? Am I making sure my people are covered appropriately? Am I making sure, certain versions of us are covered? Yeah, I could see that being a tough weight to bear because you just want to make sure that you leave the space for other people after you to have the opportunity. So yeah, I could see that being rough. But
Yeah, we also have blind spots too. I don't know what it's like. Like someone asked me on a panel if they felt like I could have written a book like The Hate U Give, which is set in like a Mississippi town, an impoverished area. And I had to be like, no, I grew up in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., spoiled, rotten. And I went to Mississippi most summers, but I went to a farm, a fully working farm that my family has had since the Civil War. So I come from a different version of Blackness. And so I can't write every version of Blackness. It would be inauthentic for me to tell a rags to riches hood life tale. I wouldn't be able to do it because I don't know it. I don't have, I can imagine it because there are parts of my family that did have that, but I didn't have that directly. So I think that we have to explore nuances within our own cultural background too, within our own house. And I don't want to ever speak over someone who has direct experience.
Answer me this. We as a people often have to code switch in whatever space of the world we occupy. How does that translate into work for Black authors? Is it easier for Black authors to craft non-Black characters or to craft white characters versus, white authors trying to write Black characters? Is it easier for us to do?
Yes, it's easier for us to write whiteness because we have lived underneath it. So we've been oppressed by it. I think that I have an intimate and familiar relationship with whiteness. I know how to write white characters. I don't need a sensitivity read for it. So my white girl in Tiny Pretty Things, she a white girl. She's the white girls that I grew up with. Like I know them intimately. It's just like I feel very comfortable writing a man because I've lived underneath misogyny and patriarchy my entire life. So I feel very intimate, an intimate relationship with that. Well, I might not get all the details right writing a man, but I do feel like I understand sort of a lot about it. So it is difficult when you are a minority. I mean, it's difficult for the majority to write the minority because they haven't had to be familiar with us. They could avoid us. They could ignore us. So the details, the texture is not there. I've had to navigate whiteness. I've been the fly in the milk my entire life. So I had to know the codes. I had to code switch. So I feel confident and comfortable knowing how to operate in that space.
It's funny because you would think, well, I can't even say that. If more people were aware of the additional skill set that Black people take on in code switching and knowing that we had the ability to work in certain spaces, we would be, they would be lining us up to bring us on to write and put out content versus people who may have a limited scope and asking them to write every piece of content that came out. It seems like we're working in reverse. Instead of inviting more white authors to write all of these stories, why don't we invite the authors who have had to live in certain spaces to write these varied stories that you want to come out? It's a false diversity in that space, and it's such an easy solution to it, and it seems like nobody wants to have that conversation to be like, hey, why don't we do this? But if no one in the room is,
nope.
yeah,
People like to hire people who look like themselves, who are part of their network, who they feel comfortable with, close with. So that's why these companies look the way they do. It's like, oh, that person could be my son or my brother or my cousin. It's a shortcut to familiarity and comfort versus hiring the person that doesn't look like you at all is more of a risk. And I think we're feeling that. And again, it's arrogance. I really believe that people think that they can write whatever they want because they think they can imagine what it's like to be somebody else and that they can fill in the details and paint us. They think it's a paint by number.
And that's
because
it.
They haven't had to. Yeah, because they haven't had to live this way.
So how do we turn the tide? How do we get more Black literary content out there? I know we have a myriad of options now because you can self-publish. You could write your book, finish it at 12 on one day and have it on Amazon the next day. So is that a way we should go? Should we look at self-publishing as a space, or should we still be looking at like your big publishing houses and trying to beat the door down and get there?
I think we have to do it all. So self-publishing was a great way that Black people especially were pushed out of publishing and traditional publishing for so long. So the indie publishing scene really burst and has been doing really, really, really great work, especially for romance, where romance is really dealing with that the way it's segregated and the way that Black content creators are sort of put into these ghettos, and they're not marketed widely. So self-publishing is hugely important. But we also have to diversify traditional publishing, because they have created all of the channels to get, especially for me, to get to children. There's a pipeline issue. And so I want Black content creators to do it all. Do everything, because why not? Our stories are valuable, they're important, people want to see them. You can also make money from them. Why allow someone who is not from your community to come and take your story and go profit from it when you can tell your own story? I want us to just step into our literary tradition. We have such a long literary tradition of great stories and storytelling, and I want us to add to that. But we have to be willing to do all of this stuff. Writing for TV, writing films, writing children's books, writing for the adult market, writing romance. We need to be doing it all. And knowing that you might have to have several jobs, but it's important. And so it's like, make it happen. Follow that passion. I just want to see really great stories being made by brown people. Because when a book series, when a TV series gets it right, when I watch Insecure or when I watch Atlanta, I'm like, this is for me. Like, this is for me. I'm laughing hysterically. Or like Random Acts of Flyness. When I'm watching that and trying to like decipher, I'm like, oh shit, this is so good. Like picking up on those codes, picking up on the little breadcrumbs that are left behind where you're like, I get the joke. I get the thing. It's powerful. Telling stories is also something that makes us human. It's something that all of us do. So when I get to see stories told about people who look like me, that have nuance and that are complicated, I'm super excited for them. It makes the world feel a little better.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, is as much as I enjoy seeing, like you said, the Insecures and the Atlantas, I love seeing the Crazy Rich Asians too, because
Yep.
I'm just as happy for them to have an opportunity to see themselves represented on screen, and I'm interested in that story. Like, I
Yes.
want to build my knowledge of, the nuances in their families and how they do certain things. So I'm looking for it to be done well. So I'm extremely excited when these opportunities come into play. It's even to the smallest things, like when I'm looking for information on a place I'm traveling to, I want to go to the Black person site and see their information. I want to go to the Latinx person site and see their information. I want to go to the person who has an exceptional ability and see their take on a place. I want to know all of the variances of experience and when it comes to certain things. So I get hyped whenever I see the opportunities there and people being able to use them and be themselves in them. So
Yeah, and we learn about each other. It's great. We learn about our neighbors, we learn about our friends, about people we love. I find it fascinating. And we can break down what these big, messy, complicated questions about being human, what they mean and how they translate into different communities. That's the fun part. So when we are blocked from being able to tell stories, we're blocked from, I think, part of what makes us human. And it leads to a dehumanization, where when I was a teacher and kids would be writing stories as assignments, they would only write about white people. All their characters had blonde hair and blue eyes because they had received the programming, the social programming from books and TV and media in this country that said that the only people that belong in stories are white people. The only people that fall in love are white people. The only people that are the hero that save the world are white people. So it's important.
I'm glad that you are doing the important work. So tell the folks where they can find. Well, before we talk about the work you've already done. What do you have coming up next for you? What's next for Dhonielle?
I have the second book in my Bells series. It comes out next year in March. It's called The Everlasting Rose. And then I have another book that it's going to announce that comes out in November called Queens. And then I have more books coming out in 2020. It's busy. The next 3 years are super busy.
That's a good
So
thing.
I have that going on. It's a great thing. Lots of travel, because I have a travel bug, just like you. Love traveling. I just got back from a month in the UK, which was excellent. Also, I want to add another career to my docket, and I'm going to go to culinary school because I want to learn how to make really, really good food, and sort of like try out some chef skills. And I'm also writing for TV and putting together some stuff on that front. Wow. So lots of great stuff.
Yeah, as if you weren't busy enough. Now you want to cook people meals.
I want to be a chef. Well, really, I want to learn how to cook really good food for myself. And then also, it's always been a dream and a passion of mine I love to cook. I love to make food. So yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to do it.
So when my first roller coaster premieres, you can do the menu for.
I'll do the menu.
Yes, perfect.
I'll make the food. I'll make all the food for you. It'll be awesome.
And then, of course, as you mentioned earlier and alluded to, you have books that are out right now that people can pick up pretty much everywhere, right?
Yeah, they're everywhere. I have my Tiny Pretty Things series. And then I have my latest book that came out called The Bells. Today, the cover for the second book just went up on social media. That book is called The Everlasting Rose. It comes out in March of next year. So yeah, you can pick those up. Can't believe it. It's 4 books so far. Oh, man.
That means you're an author. You're not just, I wrote a book. No, you have a series.
Yes.
You have a fully fleshed out world. Yes.
Yep. And I also put together books for that I have other writers write. And so my company has 2 books out right now, but we have 4 coming. The first book that came out from our company was called The Gauntlet. It's like it's like a Jumanji. If you've ever read that picture book or seen that movie, it's about 3 kids who get sucked. It's an inverted Jumanji. 3 kids who get sucked into a board game and have to work their way out. And that board game feels very much like India and the Middle East. It's called The Gauntlet of Blood and Sand is the game. And so it's really great. And it came out last year. And then this year we had a book that came out in January called Love, Sugar, Magic by a woman named Anna Mariano, who's awesome, and is about a little Mexican-American family of kitchen witches. So the little girl who discovers that her family's Mexican bakery, that all the treats that they make are full of magic. And it's about how she bungles that magic up and makes mistakes. And so that came out from HarperCollins this year. So we have more stuff coming, but it's super exciting to create books for kids and give other writers from marginalized communities opportunities to enter the publishing world and give them their start.
And let them know where they can find you on the interwebs.
Yes. So I'm on Twitter at Brown Bookworm, and I'm on Instagram at Brown Bookworm. And then I have my website is DhonielleClayton.com. So I love letters. I write letters back to people who write to me. It's my thing. So yeah, send me a letter.
Thank you so much for coming on and having this important conversation with us. I learned a lot. Like I said, I am picking up as I take breaks in between my engineering school for roller coasters. I am now becoming a sensitivity, authenticity reader.
Good.
So anybody want to send me their stuff? I have 37 years of knowledge as a Black guy. So I can talk about a lot.
I will definitely send people your way.
Yes.
Because I'm closed to reads right now. So if I get any reads that come in that are people ask me like for recommendations of people, I'll send them your way.
Please do. Fun fact, Kent went to undergrad for English. So
yes.
I have the space. And if you want someone to be a legal consultant, I got that space too.
Oh my God. You got just a triple threat here. Right. And you're a traveler.
Right. Like I'm about to add this to my website. Like
yes.
Open for books, open for readings.
Yes. That's awesome.
Of course, you guys, thank you for listening. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter as well at Kent W. Johnson. You can find the podcast on Instagram and Twitter as well at Ungentrified Pod. Please leave us your comments and your questions about the episode. We love that. You can also shoot an email at ungentrified@kentwjohnson.com. Of course, if you love what you heard today, listen to another episode. They're all dope. And if you've listened to all the other episodes, why haven't you left a review yet? Go ahead and do that. There's so many ways you can support. And ta-da! I just opened up a Patreon account. So if you want to support and get really dope exclusives, hit up the Patreon page. It's www.patreon.com/Kent W. Johnson. Slide your boy $1 or something. Because producing these ain't cheap, but I want to keep telling really dope stories and letting people come on and share their experiences with us. So thank you for listening, Dhonielle. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for dealing with my voice, my cold voice, my congested nose. I appreciate it.
Hey, look, just in time for fall. Look, you're ahead of schedule.
Right. I'm ahead of schedule. Like, I'm out here sniffling and stuff, and it's 90 degrees.
All right. Thanks for listening, and we'll check you guys next time. Peace.